A poor security guard earning just $50,000 a year suddenly realized his future daughter might become a world champion. So, before they were even born, he wrote a 78-page career plan. When his daughters turned 5, he memorized tennis books and trained them strictly by the book. Even in heavy rain, he never stopped. By the time his daughters were 10, he carried the career plan and training videos, visiting tennis clubs to promote them. But he was repeatedly rejected because tennis was a sport for white elites. As a black man, she wasn't welcomed. Even the detailed career plan was mocked as a ridiculous dream. Finally, a coach saw potential in his daughters but backed off due to Richard's strict contract. Richard demanded the best equipment and free training from the club. The coach said no one would take such a risk since tennis is costly and tough. Even millionaires struggle to train pros, let alone a security guard from a black neighborhood. White coaches doubted him, and black neighbors called him crazy, accusing him of abusing his daughters with intense training. But neither the coach's doubts nor the neighbors' criticism stopped him. He kept diligently following his plan. At night, he worked as a security guard. During the day, he took his daughters to abandoned courts to practice. They felt family love through tennis, built arm strength by throwing rackets, and practiced precision with bowling rules. Under the hot sun, daily training sharpened their skills, brought warmth to their lives, and deepened family bonds. But some people wanted to disrupt this peaceful life. Their chaotic neighborhood was full of gangs and frequent shootings. So, while focusing on tennis, Richard stayed alert to the dangers around them. In the past, he'd quickly leave with his daughters when gang members approached. But one day, when gang members harassed his 16-year-old daughter, he decided he'd had enough. He started by speaking gently. "Let the daughters wait in the car." Then sharply warned the thugs to stay away from my daughters, or else don't blame me for being rude. However, the thugs completely ignored her and even pinned her to the ground and beat her up badly. Despite the inner rage screaming to fight back, Richard held back his emotions because he didn't want to show a violent side in front of his daughters. Moreover, on the way home, he calmly told his daughters that he was bullied and beaten for various reasons as a child and has never received any respect. "I know how tough such a life is, so I strive to raise you to become champions, admired and respected by the world. And I firmly believe we will succeed." Under Richard's guidance, the daughters grew up confident and optimistic. Even though they lived in poverty, with 5 girls in one room, they never complained or got discouraged, instead always filled with laughter and positive energy. But Richard also knew that this was not a long-term solution. Only by quickly finding a suitable club can the daughters escape this environment. Considering that regular introductions didn't work, he took his 2 most talented daughters uninvited to an estate, aiming to let the coach see their performance firsthand. Initially, seeing 3 poor black people, the coach didn't want to waste time, but under Richard's persistent persuasion, he had to agree to watch the girls' performance. And this became a turning point in the 2 girls' fate. On the court, their talent and skills were fully displayed, handling both forehand and backhand with ease. Their impressive ball control skills amazed the coach, especially Venus, whose speed and strength were outstanding. Undoubtedly, the sisters, just over 10 years old, successfully caught the coach's attention. But considering various factors, she was only willing to teach Venus for free. Serena felt a bit disappointed upon hearing this, but Richard told her, "You must always be ready to face insurmountable situations." The mother comforted, saying, "You feel neglected, but actually, you're not, because you also got something great, which is my personal guidance." It turns out Richard had already prepared a backup plan. While Venus was training, he stood outside recording with a camera. Later, bring these precious impressions back and have your wife strictly follow the guidance to train Serena. Time only enriches the years. This summer has the passionate gusts of strong winds and the tranquility of settled memories. This field has the loneliness of being unnoticed and the details of poetry in distant places. Looking back, there is the quietly passing time. Looking ahead, there are scenes under the stars and moon. With Venus's rapid progress, the coach suggested she enter the Junior Tennis Championship. Because there, Venus can not only break through bottlenecks in matches but also it's the best stage to shine. Seeing the anticipation on Venus's face, Richard agreed to the suggestion. Soon it was the day of the match. Since it was her first time competing, Richard knew his daughter would be nervous, so he reminded her not to worry about the result, just enjoy the process. Though she appeared relaxed, when the match officially started, Venus made serious mistakes due to nerves. Fortunately, Richard appeared in time and calmed her with a few words, helping her regain her training state. Then, leveraging her control and power, Venus surged ahead and won the championship without suspense. Perhaps because success came too easily, on the way home, Venus and her sisters kept boasting about their success and belittling opponents, which made Richard very angry because he believed everyone on the court deserves respect, win or lose. Moreover, after returning home, he organized a family viewing of The Story of the Girl. After the screening, He asked the kids what they learned. Some said to always have dreams, others said not to throw shoes around. However, these answers were not what Richard wanted. He truly wanted his daughters to understand that no matter the situation, they must maintain inner purity and humility, or they could easily be overwhelmed by victory or crushed by defeat. From then on, the sisters settled down and began practicing more diligently. However, that day, when they finished training in the rain and drove home, they unexpectedly found a police car parked at the door. It turned out a neighbor reported them for child abuse. Hearing this, Richard was furious. He didn't deny being strict with his daughters, but it was all to give them a chance to escape a place filled with violence and crime. And his efforts paid off. Besides Venus and Serena, who are tennis prodigies, the other 3 daughters excel in school. With no abuse evidence, the police left assured. Then, his gentle wife suddenly went to the neighbors, knocked, and angrily told her to mind her business. Everyone knew the neighbor was just jealous. She didn't want a black couple's kids to excel. In later tournaments, Venus dominated, winning 17 trophies in a year, and Serena made a splash, winning second in her first contest. With more exposure, the sisters hit headlines, praised as tennis prodigies. The First Lady came for photos, and top agent Tap Menkai wanted to sign them. They offered to cover all tennis costs if they joined more competitions and trained harder. Only this way can players grow and gain exposure, but this clashed with Richard's plan. He thought the kids needed education more and planned to stop them from junior competitions. In past contests, he saw parents supporting cheating, and if they lost, they cursed. Kids couldn't handle the pressure, becoming unstable. Richard feared his daughters would become fragile and opportunistic in such an environment. So he decided they'd focus on self-improvement and return to competitions when older. But the coach thought time was precious, and quitting now would ruin their future. All famous players are honed through many competitions. But Richard was resolute. So, with differing views, they parted ways. Even after deciding, Richard wasn't sure it was right. At night, he went to the court alone to relieve stress by playing. Unexpectedly, the thug returned, provoking him. At first, Richard ignored him, until they threatened his daughter. He was like a lion provoked, grabbing a racket and smashing it. But 2 fists can't beat 4 hands, and he was soon knocked down and beaten. After waking up, already upset, he decided to get back at them. But when he drove to find the thugs and was about to approach with a gun, they were suddenly shot by a rival gang. At that moment, Richard finally came to his senses, realizing violence only leads to more tragedy. Only by leaving could he protect his family. So, he worked harder to connect with top coaches nationwide. Finally, his efforts paid off, and he contacted the famous Macy in Florida. After seeing the sisters' skills, Macy immediately decided to sign them, offering great terms, free food, lodging, and training, with the only requirement being a 15% cut of their future income. But Richard disagreed because Macy's tennis base was far in Florida, and he couldn't let his daughters go alone. So, he proposed that to sign the sisters, they must arrange housing and jobs for the whole family in Florida. Also, they needed to find the best local schools for the other daughters. Despite these tough conditions, Macy agreed, confident in herself and the sisters. Thus, Richard escaped the slums. On the way to Florida, the scenery became sweet, with clouds against the blue sky, shrubs dotting the desert. This vast wilderness lacked the city's hustle and bustle, offering a serene breeze. The road was filled with past joys and future hopes. After twists and turns, they finally arrived. At Macy's tennis base, Richard expected only top players but found many mediocre ones. Macy explained with a smile that by taking in these rich kids, they could fund truly talented students. To surprise the sisters, Macy invited her prized student, Jennifer, a tennis star at the time. Knowing they could practice with her, the sisters were overjoyed, dancing with excitement as they watched the 3 of them sweat it out on the court. Macy shared her training plan, which matched the coach's focus on youth competitions. Richard rejected it immediately. Macy then realized the contract stated they couldn't compete without his consent. Feeling tricked, she almost cursed but had already signed. She blamed herself for not reading it carefully, letting a slum guard fool her. With Venus's serve, 3 years passed. Venus learned 4 languages, excelled in academics, and her tennis skills soared. Though she didn't compete, Richard's media invites kept her in the spotlight, making her a tennis topic. Media questioned Richard's decision to keep his daughters from competing. He explained that without better education, even if they earned a lot before 18, it could be wasted, leading to a wasted life. Despite his intentions, Richard was seen as authoritarian, never asking his daughters' opinions. Venus wanted to compete and asked Macy to persuade their father. After many rejections, Macy was hesitant but couldn't refuse Venus's pleading eyes. So, he approached Richard, saying Venus, now 14, was at her peak in skills and fitness. She's ready for intense competitions, and I see her desire and determination. I don't want this passion extinguished. Maybe moved. Richard didn't reject it outright but smiled, saying he'd consider it. Seeing hope, Messi shared the news with Venus. But when she returned to train Venus, she learned Richard canceled the training and took the sisters next door. Disney trip confusion led Messi to angrily confront Richard at his home. Coincidentally, Richard had just returned from Disney with his wife and kids. Furious, Messi questioned Richard in front of Venus about missing the afternoon training. Richard replied that he had decided not to let Venus participate in the upcoming tournament. Earlier, when Richard was considering letting his daughter compete, the TV suddenly reported that 18-year-old Jennifer, once a star on the court, was arrested for drug use. Richard felt Messi's pressure caused such tragedies, so he decided against the tournament to protect his daughter. This decision not only angered Messi but also disappointed his supportive wife for the first time. "You're too selfish and arrogant, though I understand your concern for our daughters. Afraid they might go astray and unable to handle pressure, you've always made decisions for them. But as parents, we must learn to let go. One day, they must walk alone and face this imperfect, even harsh world. I believe we've fulfilled our parental duties, and now we must trust them to be responsible for their choices. Children are like sand. Hold too tightly, and you lose them." His wife's heartfelt words deeply moved Richard, making him realize his years of control deprived his daughters of choices. After Venus learned she couldn't compete, she angrily went to the court alone. Realizing his mistake, Richard found her that night and explained his previous stubbornness. As a black man, Richard once accidentally touched a white person's hand and was attacked by a group of white people. His father didn't defend him but fled like a coward, leaving young Richard alone in pain. Though Richard never received paternal protection, he didn't want to be like his father or leave his children defenseless. He showed his love with all his might, even if it seemed obsessive to others. His intention was always to protect his children from harm and humiliation. Even though black people's status has improved, they still face discrimination. As a world-famous tennis star, Venus represents all black girls, facing more scrutiny. Without strong support, the journey is tough. That's why Richard is so cautious. However, he overlooks that under his guidance, his daughter is confident and resilient. This way, they open up to each other. And the fledgling protected by fatherly love faces the challenge of soaring. Venus's return after 3 years made headlines, shaking the tennis world. The night before the match, Nike offered a $300,000 endorsement, valid only until the match started. With a simple signature, she could earn $300,000, improving her life. No one could resist such temptation. Although both Messi and Richard were tempted, they left the decision to Venus. Without hesitation, Venus declined because she was confident in her abilities and knew her worth far exceeded $300,000. However, during the match the next day, the pressure and lack of experience caused her to lose the first 2 sets. Even after regaining her composure, she was still overwhelmed in the 3rd set. Believing the match was lost, the Nike representative left early, and others began to lose faith. Only her father signaled her to stay calm. With his reassurance, Venus took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and recalled the sweat-drenched days, every return shot, every time she got back up after falling, and her father's heartfelt advice. Returning to the court, Venus's cold gaze focused solely on her opponent. With all doubts cast aside, he faced each attack with composure. Regardless of the angle, gradually, he drew his opponent into his rhythm. 1, 2, 3 times, the familiar control returned to his right hand. With the final smash, he won the match. Venus, who had been doubted by many, finally stood tall. Once again, the crowd erupted in applause. Upon hearing the news, Nike quickly raised the endorsement fee to $400,000, but it was flatly rejected by the 2 women. Venus was set to face the world's #1 player tomorrow, determined to prove herself in this match. At that moment, Richard noticed her sister Serena staring blankly at the court. He knew what she was thinking and walked over to say firmly, "I know it's not easy being overshadowed by your sister's fame, but I let you get hit because I know you're strong. I also know you're resilient and full of fighting spirit. One day, this court will be yours, and you shouldn't doubt it because it's all part of my plan." As the Oakland court was draped in black gauze, the focus of the match began. Venus, with her shining dreadlocks, was full of excitement and anticipation as she stepped onto the dreamlike green field. Outside, Richard appeared unusually calm, as if the victory was already in his expectations. The match unfolded just as he foresaw. Venus, with her innate talent and years of relentless effort, quickly showed overwhelming dominance. Her powerful defense and counterattacks swept through the opponent's defenses like a storm, making it hard for them to withstand. Her aggressive offense surged like a tide, constantly battering the opponent's defenses, leaving them teetering. Her momentum was like a towering mountain, crushing the opponent's spirit, leaving them struggling in despair. However, just when everyone thought Venus would win, the opponent, on the coach's signal, suddenly called a timeout and walked into the restroom under everyone's gaze, staying there for a full 15 minutes. This is a common delay tactic in matches, aimed at draining the opponent's enthusiasm and breaking their mindset. This low-level trick was quite effective against the inexperienced Venus. When the match resumed, he first hit out of bounds, then missed a serve, and later even struggled to return the ball. In contrast, the opponent gained momentum and pressed forward step by step, ultimately leading to Venus's defeat. After the match, he sat alone in the locker room, feeling deeply remorseful for his loss. Unlike many parents who use a suppressive style of education, Richard encouraged him, saying, "I've never been prouder of you in my life. You pushed the world's top-ranked player to the limit for 2 hours, even forcing him to use dirty tricks. If you can't respect yourself for that, no one else will." After hearing this, Venus regained her courage, shouldered her bag, and walked out of the court with her family, head held high. Richard's words came true as they opened the stadium doors to a crowd of enthusiastic supporters chanting Venus's name. To them, Venus was the true champion, deserving of the title for her skill and grace. Moreover, 9 months later, at just 15, Venus received an endorsement deal from Reebok, not for $300,000 or $400,000, but for an astonishing $1.02 million. Serena followed Venus into the tour 2 years later. The plans Richard made for his daughters in the slums almost, directed by Reynaldo Marcus Green and starring Will Smith and Sanaya Sidney, is a biographical film released in 2019. It tells the legendary story of how Richard Williams raised 2 top tennis players, Venus and Serena, in a poor neighborhood. Facing racial and gender discrimination, Richard trained his daughters in unconventional ways and protected them with an iron fist from outside distractions. Despite financial struggles, family conflicts, and public skepticism, he always believed in his daughters' talents. The sisters quickly grew under pressure, ultimately breaking through tennis barriers to become world champions. When Venus was 41, a coach asked her what achievements she wanted in the future. At that time, she boldly said, "I want to win Wimbledon multiple times and match historical records." Unexpectedly, she later won Wimbledon 5 times and became the first African-American woman to be ranked world number 1 in the Open era. As for her sister Serena, she surpassed expectations, winning 23 Grand Slam titles. As Richard predicted, many consider her the greatest player in tennis history, as their father and coach. Richard always believed patience, family, and education matter more than early fame. He used this unique approach to challenge the sports system, becoming the king behind his daughter's success. He stressed the world will respect you, motivating his daughters and transforming the dignity he never got into rewriting the next generation's fate. Some might find his love too strong, but with scarce resources and racial barriers, if he didn't stand firm, how could he help his kids master their destiny? Beneath his strong exterior, his love held subtle respect. He refused short-term sponsor gains, choosing a more inclusive environment for his kids' long-term growth. When his daughters faced doubts, he shielded them from questions, acting as a fatherly barrier. This wasn't over-interference but trust in their abilities. He knew when to shield his kids from pressure and when to let them face challenges. His love wasn't neglect or control but a balance of respect and protection. First be a person, then be talented, is Richard's philosophy, a principle for all. In a restless society, many rush to be talented but neglect character, leading to emptiness after fame and losing direction after skills. Some go astray, ruining lives. The ancients warned talent without virtue is like a tower on sand, destined to collapse. Educator Dao Xingzi warned without moral restraint, greater talent means greater harm. Only by first being a person can talent serve justice and goodness, and not become a tool of selfish desires. In this fast-paced era, people need virtue to guide talent onto the right path. That's all for today's movie sharing. Please like, comment, and share. Looking forward to our next meeting.
Yeah.